Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Hi, everybody. We're talking today about eating in secret. So I want to get into it. But first, I also want to invite everyone to go to the show notes and look for the link to find out when our next monthly live Zoom call will be, as we've decided to continue hosting these at least on a monthly basis for right now, so that we can get together as a community and give everyone a space to hear from other people who are going through similar situations and learn from others and just feel less alone. So that will be linked in show notes.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of secrets and secrecy, we don't record the calls. So it's an opportunity really to talk about this stuff as private as an online space can be. And I think people have really appreciated that in past events, because I know some people have wanted to come and it doesn't work with their time zones, but our reasons for not recording it are so people can talk about this stuff that is normally so secretive.
Yeah. And you are free to also not have your camera on and put an alias on your name. So just getting that out there. But speaking about eating in secret. So I think just when I think about, like being someone who is binge eating versus someone who is quote unquote a normal eater, a main difference is this alone, I eat in secret, I eat without the awareness of anyone else looking at me. Like I feel shame when I eat, so I need to do it privately feeling. And so I'm wondering, like, is this something that itself drives the binge eating, or is it something that is a result of the binge eating? Like, where does the shame start? Which comes first here?
Mm-hmm. It's actually mentioned in the binge eating disorder criteria. Part of it is the eating in secrecy. It doesn't have to be there, but it's like a subsection. So it's noted that this is a big part of what binge eating is about. The secrecy comes from not wanting to be seen, not wanting people to know. And that for me links to shame and links to this idea that this thing that we're doing is so terrible. People will think so badly. People will judge me probably in the way I'm judging me as well. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is because I know I'm biased and you'll probably agree with me because you're biased as well. But I think this problem is way bigger than we have any idea because of the secrecy part. And it's why we need voices and people who are willing to be part of a community and say, yeah, I do this. I struggle with this too. And I found in groups when somebody shares something that they do around their eating in secret, a common one is taking wrappers out to like a public bin in your pockets and putting them in a public bin. And that's been shared in groups several times. And when someone shares it, everyone kind of goes, me too. I thought I was the only one who was doing that, and hiding things even within your own bin. If you live with people, pushing things under wrappers, all the ways we hide the evidence afterwards is a big part of it. When we're talking about this secrecy, we're not just talking about nobody actually seeing you eating.
Yeah. Well, there's also an element of it that's like you feel completely abnormal. I remember, I used to live with roommates who I didn't know super well. Like they weren't very, very close friends of mine. They were kind of acquaintances. And like, I remember that's all that I did was hide. I would take out the trash every 5 minutes because I didn't want them to see how fast it was piling up, how many cereal boxes were inside. I would literally come home from work before them, like an hour before them, and I would like eat 2 boxes of cereal. I still remember the kind of cereal. And I would be like, oh, they're going to see, they're going to know I need to get this out. It was a whole race before they got home. And to a degree, it was like, well, I felt, again, justified in that because it was like, well, nobody eats 2 boxes of cereal when they come home from work. Like sometimes I think it was 3, but it was like, it wasn't normal. And it was like, to me, they were normal eaters. I don't know. I think, but and it was like, if they knew what I was doing, they would be completely turned off and be like, you're weird. You can't live with us anymore. Or they would just think it and I would have to live alongside of that. So there, to a degree, it felt like a preservation of self. I don't want anyone to know the degree. It wasn't like I was just eating a bowl of cereal like they might do and feeling shame about that. It was like, no, but I'm eating boxes of cereal every day. And I don't want anyone to know that because it isn't normal. And so it felt like I had a right or like I had an obligation to keep it secret so that people weren't aware of, well, number one, that they weren't aware of how disordered I was. And number two, like I didn't want to share that with them anyway. So it felt like I needed to hide it so that I didn't have to shout to the world that like I have binge eating disorder. Like that wasn't something I was comfortable with people knowing. So there's that too. It's kind of like there's a bit of it that makes that on a practical level that feels like we have to hide this or people will know and then everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. And for most of my binge eating, I lived with flatmates as well. So is this constant tiptoeing around, and I think it just became so normal. Like I didn't even notice that I was hiding stuff. It's not like each time I thought, oh, I have to do this secretly. It just becomes part of this routine. And then I lived with a flatmate for a while, and she also really struggled with food. And she was so open about it from the moment that she moved in, and she would openly binge. And we got to this point where, I shared a lot of my struggles as well. And it's the only time in my life, the first time in my life, I binged with another person.
Wow.
And it was this, for me, I know like some people go, that's not very healthy, but there was something about it for me that really helped to reduce, maybe this isn't the most awful thing ever.
Yeah.
It was the same with, and it happens a lot in, I don't want to stereotype here, but a lot of kind of groups of women where people will talk about the things they don't like about their body or how they ate this much and they're not happy about it. And I never spoke about that kind of thing. And I would always be really surprised that people would want to draw attention to those things. But that time when I lived with that flatmate, we bonded a lot over that. Yeah. And it was I feel like it was a really significant part of my emotional journey with this. At the time, I know mine was bulimia, and I don't know if I ever told her that it was bulimia as well. So it wasn't a case of we laid everything out and we were 100% honest with each other. But yeah, that was just, it came to mind when I was thinking about this secrecy part. I think one of the lowest points for me was, I remember, and it was when I was in the police and I was on a night duty, and I think it was about 3:00 in the morning. I remember going up to the top floor canteen and buying a couple of chocolate bars and going and sitting on the toilet to eat the chocolate bars at 3:00 in the morning. And I remember that, and I remember how I felt, how out of control I felt at that point, and how gross it was as well to be like sitting in the bathroom. This was not about, oh, I fancy some chocolate, so I'm going to have some chocolate. This was compulsion. This was out of control. And there were some offices that would be locked at night and I might know the key code and I could shut myself away in one of those and just get away and binge. And offering to do errands was another one.
Yeah.
For me, I can go and do an errand on my own, and that's an opportunity to buy food and binge. Driving in the car.
Yes.
I was talking to this doctor in Texas the other week about binge eating. And he was talking about, with part of your brain shut off when you binge, that really you're driving like you're drunk. It's quite dangerous to be driving when you're binge eating because your higher faculties are not fully turned on. And I, for me, my experience, I do not want to presume this about anybody else, but there were definitely times with that where I thought, in hindsight, looking and thinking, I probably shouldn't have been driving in that state.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I agree. I remember distinctly actually coming home from a therapy session, binge, as I would binge always after therapy sessions in my car, and almost hitting the car in front of me at one point because I was going so fast, because like my mind was going so fast too, and I was eating so fast and I was going so fast, and I almost, I mean, it was like to the point where they had to swerve out of the way. I remember this still. I dream about it sometimes. And yeah, and I also, interesting you say that, because I remember thinking at various times in my binge eating history that I felt drunk from it. I felt
Mm-hmm.
drunk. It almost like would give me this like bewildered. Sometimes I would get giddy, this weird giddy like laugh. Like occasionally that would happen. And I was like, I feel a little drunk. But I think it just speaks of to how parts of our brains are shutting off. But also for me, like eating in secret was more appealing because eating in public meant I had to restrain myself. Like I was only allowed to eat so much in front of someone. And so for me, it was like, get me out of here. I need to eat where I'm free. I need to eat where I can have as much need for food as I want or feel, and not have to feel like I have to stop to please someone else or to look a certain way. So it was like my freedom time. It was the only time that I felt like I could have as much as I actually wanted or needed. Um, and that eating in front of other people felt so, there wasn't the same joy. It never tasted as good. It felt so mechanical, and there was something about being alone with food that felt more like I could enjoy it more. I could, even though I'm not sure I did, but like in theory, it's like you think that it's your space and that you can sort of like taste it all and just focus on the food, whereas in at a restaurant with someone else or something like that, or at a table with someone else, it's more of like a communal, like you're talking, you're not just eating, you're paying attention to other things. And I just wanted to pay attention to the food. I didn't want to see it in the context of like life. It was something different, it was something separate. I wanted it categorized in a different way, because eating in front of people took away from what felt like my like moment of joy. It was like my moment of pleasure, and I wanted it. I didn't want anything to distract me from it.
Would you ever binge in public places? When you were talking, I had these
Mm.
memories coming back. And I used to get the train between London and Bournemouth quite a bit. And that's sort of an hour, 50 minutes on the train. And I would always go to M&S and buy some food for the train, some binge foods for the train as well. And when I got on the train, I would want a two-seater so I could be tucked away in the window. But if it got busy and someone came and sat right next to me,
Mm.
then I can remember that agitation and frustration, like, why are you sitting next to me?
Yeah.
But if nobody came and sat next to me, I could quite happily binge on the train in my two-seater, feeling,
Yeah.
I don't know if I thought I was invisible or just assuming that no one was really paying attention to me, which was probably
Right.
true as well. And I binged on the underground so many times.
Mm.
I used to have stuff in my bag and I would just be reaching in my bag and taking things out of my bag so no one could see. They'd only see what I was taking out. They wouldn't see the packet. They wouldn't know how many packets I was on. And that for me is strange to look back at that and I was so publicly doing it at times as well. But I felt like no one could see me.
Yeah. I would do it in airports all the time.
Oh,
Not that I
yeah.
was on so many airports, but like waiting for me has always been a binge trigger, like any sort of waiting for something. So when I would get to an airport and if there was a layover, I would binge my way through that entire layover, going from market to market, like what shop to shop. And yeah, I mean, there were millions of people around. I would just walk around, and sometimes I would sit. Yeah, I would sit too, and I would just eat. But when there's that many people, it's also like no one's talking to you. Or I mean, like I would be at the airport alone, and it's easy to screen out everybody than to be like in a more intimate situation with like, I don't think I ever binged where there was like one or two people present. I don't think that I can recall at the moment. Actually, that's not true. No, I used to do that in college, but I would try to sneak it. It wasn't an open binge. It wasn't like, yeah, I'm doing this, guys. It was more
Mhm.
like, I'm just trying to get away with looking like I'm not doing this. But it felt that was more of a compulsion to me. It was more like I'd rather be alone. It's just that I don't have the opportunity to be, and I need to do this. Like this is getting done. So I
Mhm.
just have to do it this way. And again, I would go to the bathroom to get some of that in. as well, like any opportunity to just, and then it became more about, it was less about the food, obviously, but like it was much less about the food as much as like getting as much as I could. Like it was about that. I would be full to sickness and it'd be like, I need to keep going because I can't, or because I'm not hidden. And there was also something very much about the juxtaposition of binging with real life. When I was binging among people, somehow it was like being forced to move from something I was doing that was very much like I wanted to ignore and not consider part of my reality, with being in the moment, with speaking to people and having like going about my life. To me, this was like, I need to not integrate these two things. I need binging to be something that's almost like not happening, because that's how I'm getting through it. And I need to get through it. And it was such an awful feeling to be living alongside of that, and to be expected to be a functioning human, having a conversation with someone. It would bring me out of that numbness, which was not cool for me.
I'm also thinking now some of our younger listeners who have never known the pain of not having self-service checkouts. I used to go to like 3 or 4 different places to get what I wanted for a binge, and then self-service checkouts came in whilst I was still binging, and it felt like a game changer from that aspect. And I don't know if you'd ever had this where, you know, there's a problem with something with the basket and someone has to come over and you basically got a basket full of binge foods.
I used to put things in there to make it look like I was having a party. Like, you know, I would just try to really disguise it. But I think it also brings up, you know, the idea of eating in private is it's your time. It's your time for you. And where we're not potentially, I think that it sounds really threatening to think about giving that up. Like, this is the only time I get to myself. And this is the only time that I give myself access to something that's just mine, and that's like almost becomes like this, it's like a love-hate relationship with it. And but it's I think we've spoken about this in an early episode, but having that space that is yours, that is your time for pleasure, and having like a resistance of giving that away.
I wanted to talk about in this episode, you know, Janine Roth's 7 eating guidelines. For the listeners who might not know, Janine Roth writes a lot about women, particularly in their relationship with food, and her guidelines were kind of pre-intuitive eating, I would say, as ways to eat. And one of them, do you know the one that I'm thinking of? I don't know how familiar, how well burned into your brain they are.
Eating
around secrecy, what the guideline is, that's a kind of
pulling up a chair.
No, you're thinking of when you eat at the refrigerator, pull up a chair.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking of one of her guidelines is eat as if you're in full view of everyone. Sometimes in the groups I put them up in the chat just for people to look at them and check out their responses. It's not that I'm teaching everybody to do them. And one of the ones that people balk at the most is that one. How on earth am I supposed to eat as if I'm in full view of everyone? Certainly for me, there's this idea or this desire to eat perfectly in front of other people. For a long time, I think people who didn't know that I struggled with food would never have guessed, because from what they saw of me eating and what I was actually eating, the two were so different. So I think this particular guideline from Janine really speaks to that dissonance. But it's also a really hard one to put into practice, because is it eat how you would feel comfortable eating in front of everybody, or is it carry on eating as you are, but make sure that you get rid of the secrecy part of it? I find there's not enough direction in there for me.
It also feels like a way of making me eat less.
Which I think it probably is. I think that might be
which I'd rebel against in a heartbeat. We hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. We just want to take a minute of your time to let you know we're now on Patreon. If you would like to support our work and be a part of our growing community, please head to patreon.com/lifeafterdiets.
All of our patrons are invited to join us in our Life After Diets private Facebook group to connect with us and other like-minded souls. For more details about how to contact us or to work with Sarah or Stef individually, please check out the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode. I think for a while I was even afraid of letting people know that I enjoyed eating food. I almost hid the fact that I had an appetite. And then last year I was on holiday with a friend, and she was like, you keep going on about how hungry you are. Because I think like every evening about 6 o'clock, I'd be like, I'm so hungry, I can't wait for dinner. She's like, is that all you think about? And I remember my initial response, I had this flash of shame initially at that being commented upon. And I kind of looked at it and thought, no, I'm really enjoying my food. Being on holiday for me, one of the biggest pleasures is that going out to eat in the evenings, having a lovely meal and some wine. And so, I'm going to be vocal about how much I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like a foodie. I feel like I love food, and I look forward to meals. I don't feel shame about that. But I did when I felt out of control with it. So then I hid it in like the orthorexia too, where I was like this perfect eater and everything I ate was like, quote unquote perfect. And so I felt like that gave me some sort of pass. Like I could enjoy eating because I was eating the right things. And so I would always eat that way in front of people, and I would eat like the right amounts and the right combinations and things like that. And that was an identity that I had, that I still felt like that was me. I think we've talked about this before too. Like it was me. It was like the best me. It was like the version of me I wanted to be. So I felt like I needed to display it because I felt like I deserved it in some way. And then I had this other me that would do things behind, but that was like the broken me that wasn't really me. And so I needed to make these things distinct. It was like they can't cross, because I have this idea of myself that I need to keep clean. And this other side I'm doing, I just need to fix her. And I need to leave her behind closed doors because that's not the real me. The other part about eating in secrecy was I felt like it was really easy for me to control myself with food in front of other people, like very easy. So eating in the presence of others was like I didn't want to, because I knew that it was behind the scenes, that's when I would lose control with food. So I wanted to save it up. Like it was like, if I eat now in front of you, when I can control myself, then it's like giving away some control that I need in other times, or like that I need to make up for the lack of control. So for me, it was like knowing, it was like, well, I know this about myself. I know I'm going to lose control when I'm alone. So I need to maximize my time in front of others, which I think just perpetuated this whole cycle of feeling restricted, because I was never enjoying what other people were enjoying, or I was simply just like not ordering something. Or I always think about it like when I would go out for ice cream with my kids and a mom friend and their kids, and we would go out and the kids would all get something. And sometimes the other moms would get something and I would be like, no, thanks, I'm good, and I wasn't necessarily hungry because maybe I had just binged prior, or maybe I was planning to binge later, or that would be what would happen. But it was so easy for me not to order it that I was like, don't go there, because why would you do that when you actually have control? But ultimately that was feeding a whole restriction mentality of everyone can go out and enjoy ice cream together, but I can't. Like I'm not allowed to do that for whatever reasons, whether they felt justified or not. Like it was still feeding the idea that like I wasn't able to have access to that kind of simple pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I relate to that. I found it easy to manage my eating around people, going on holiday with people, and they'd be complaining about gaining weight on holiday or something like that. And I never did, because I was eating less than I was eating when I was at home. And then I was just thinking about when I spoke at that MAC nutrition conference. The night before the conference, we had a speaker's dinner. And I wasn't feeling very well. I was pretty nervous. I'd had a really late lunch because there'd been all these problems with the underground and I'd missed my train. And so when I came for dinner, I was not hungry. I just wanted to go to bed. I didn't want to eat. And everyone at the table ordered pizza and burgers and chips, and I didn't want anything. And I ordered a salad. And I sat there thinking, I wonder what they're thinking. Oh, the binge eating therapist only orders a salad. And then I couldn't even eat the salad because my stomach was churning so much. And I think as well, because I was nervous and I had a lot of emotions going on, I felt so self-conscious about what they were imagining, whether they thought it was a performative thing, like having a salad, or I don't know. It was really, really interesting how self-conscious I then felt ordering a salad.
Well, I think with the way that binge eating is misinterpreted to me, I think some people would say like, see, yeah, she doesn't binge. She knows how to eat salads. Like that's the antidote to binging.
Yeah.
But it brings to mind how I'm so easily triggered by lack of connection and how easily I get lonely, how easily I feel disconnected, and how food would fill that void. When you were talking about vacation, I was thinking about how when I would hang out with friends or go away for a weekend, like a girls' weekend, I would almost say to myself, there is nothing in me that wants to binge. Like I would feel so free of it. And I would be like, why is this so hard to hold on to in day to day life? And I think it is sometimes that connection. And maybe for some people, generalizing here, but for me anyway, it was that I was much more likely to need food when I felt disconnected, which was when I was alone. So the inclination to eat when I'm alone, I now see is more of I need connection, or something to fill that lack of connection feeling. Because when I'm with others, sometimes it's completely absent. That desire would be completely absent because I'm full. Like I'm full of what I need. You know what I mean? And that also can be a factor when we're talking about like it's secrecy eating, but maybe it's also part of like aloneness, like eating in because you're in isolation.
Mm-hmm. That was definitely a big part of it for me. And I think the other piece was when I was around people, there was no negotiation going on. It just wasn't an option. So I didn't have to battle with my own mind. I would occasionally, I'd been around people and I would feel agitated because I'd want to get away and binge. But a lot of the time I felt exactly how you described. But it's not an option. So, I've got a reprieve from fighting with my mind all day.
Right. Yeah. It's like your decision. There's no decision to make. One of the things that I teach about in my programs is initially the practice of eating in front of others. Not to say that we're taking away eating in isolation, but practicing more often. Because how many times I've had clients who directly express a fear of eating in front of others, and asking oneself to do that to communicate back to your body that you're eating on purpose and that it is real, is I think part of like a reverse engineering the shame a little bit. There is a part of the feedback you're getting when you're eating in front of others. It's like saying to yourself, I deserve to be eating and I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to be eating. And to invite that in, because the inclination is to not do that and to run away, and it's easier, much, but to actively go out of the comfort zone to do that more. I have a client I'm working with right now who came to me saying, I mean, she absolutely never ate in front of her roommates. And this was a huge source of shame for her, admittedly. And where we've been working together for over 2 months at this point. And she is like, it's one of those things where she's like, oh my gosh, like I'm eating in front of them daily. She's not having the self-talk. Like she's not like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? What are they thinking? What are they thinking? She's like, I just realized that isn't something that's happening anymore. I think sometimes it's just like the practice of doing something over and over and over again to help assuage the shame that is there just by virtue of doing it more. So for me, that's always a concrete sort of actionable way of addressing this.
Well, there's eating in front of people, and then there's eating perhaps binge foods or eating in a certain way in front of people. I've heard people who are trying to do this whole bringing it out into the open more, and they fall into the trap of buying, let's take the packets of like the 4 big cookies that we get in the supermarket here, and then putting them out on the side so that they're visible. They're not hidden away. They're not in your bedroom in a drawer. They're there visible for people to see. But then I also sometimes have seen people slip into that, well, it's almost an accountability thing. If my flatmates or my family can see them out because they'll know how many I've had. So it's trying to use that external accountability to control how much of them you eat, because you might take away your freedom a bit by doing that, your freedom to choose, because you're saying like, I'm not allowed, because then they'll know.
They'll know. That never worked for me anyway. I think I did try to do things like that, and it would, well, then you just go to the store and you replace it.
Temporarily, like it'll work for a couple of days, then you'll beat yourself up for why you couldn't do it forever.
And then you go to more drastic means of hiding the fact that you ate them. You run to I used to run
Yeah.
to the store and be like, I lived with my aunt for a little while after college, and I like used to eat their ice cream, and I used to eat the whole remaining half gallon plus the other one in reserve, go to the store, come back, get the reserve one, and then like scrape out however much I remembered being missing,
Mhm.
from like so that it would look pretty similar. I'm sure I wonder sometimes like how many people were totally on to me, who were like, this is not how much was left. Or like there was a divot where there wasn't, like how much. I guess I didn't care. It was kind of like, well, I replaced it. So
On the hiding and secrecy front, and I know we spoke the other week about taking food that's not necessarily yours. When you see something and you think, how much can I get away with taking before it's
mhm,
noticeable? Is it a slither of a cake that's left behind? Is it one spoonful of the
mhm,
flatmate's Nutella? How much of the cereal can you get away with the granola before it looks like it's gone down? It's
mhm,
all these kinds of secretive behaviors that when people are in their, I want to say that their right mind, if that's not really a great expression, but when they're more back to who they are and they realize that they've done these things, is it any wonder that people are going around thinking, well, I must be addicted to food because this is
yeah,
addict behavior to
yeah,
take things that don't belong to me, even though
mhm,
I'm not a thief, I'm not a person
yeah,
who
but
thinks it's okay to take things that don't belong to me. But in that moment of desperation, it feels like addict behavior, right? And the secrecy part we haven't mentioned as well, the lying, which is a form of secrecy as well, that not
yeah,
being truthful and how corrosive that is
mhm,
to live in that state of untruthfulness.
yeah. That just made me feel things. Um,
What did you feel,
yeah,
Steph?
I don't know, like, I remember that. I think
Mm,
that when you said that, like, I remember then you pretty much lying. I felt like there were times I was just lying all the time,
mm,
and how it does feel. You feel like you're not worthy of being seen because pretty much it takes over so much of you that you're just constantly covering the pieces, and then I think it becomes, yeah, you wrap it up in who you are, and then it becomes like I'm not worthy of being seen. I'm not worthy of being known. If people knew me or saw me, they would reject me. The worthiness that then I mean, it's a deflation entirely, and it's really low. I
mm,
just really remember how quickly that would bring on my depression, and or how it was intertwined with it, and um feeling that way of like, how do you get out? Like when you feel that low, um, that it seems really hopeless. If it feels like it's like hard to fight for yourself at that point because you're just drowning all the time. Oh yeah, it's so dark. That's what
mm,
that was the feeling.
yeah. It made me think of that word disconnection again
Mm,
because it's so disconnecting. You can even look like you're connected and involved and relating to people, but when you feel like who you are behind closed doors is so different to what other people are seeing, that is an incredibly disconnecting experience. So when you say, how do you get yourself out of that? I think connection
mhm,
is a big part of it. And I think connection can be found in the smallest amount in a social media post where someone speaks to something that, yes, that's me, I've experienced that. Maybe people feel some connection listening to this episode and thinking, oh my goodness, that I've done those things. And
yeah,
here are people, two other people, at least two other people
yeah,
um,
yeah.
who've been there as well.
And how counterintuitive actually I think it feels in those moments to connect. Like for me, I remember, the deeper I got into that disconnection, the less worthy I felt of connection, and the less I would actively seek it out. Absolutely. I remember my mother used to say that to me all the time. Like she would see me from her point of view and say, like, Steph, you just need to get out. You need to go hang out with your friends. Like you need to come out of your room, and you need to, I mean, granted, it was like the methodology was lacked, but it was an idea that she could understand what I needed, and I was like, "No, I wanna hide. I mean, that is the instinct, and so it is so counterintuitive, which is why I think it feels so hopeless to go seek out the very thing that you may need because you feel so bad. You feel
Mhm.
so unworthy of that. Um, and to me, that's a kind of an angle of I think about people I've heard talking about eating at night in secret, like when their partner is even home, but just finding that space of like hiding in the pantry or when or going upstairs to the bedroom or whatever it is to eat. And that's like this coveted time of the night that's really difficult to break. And I wonder too about, how that then makes you feel more like disconnecting when someone's in your home or when there might be an opportunity to connect. And that I wonder what happens when we lean into that, even amidst the feeling of disconnection, and what that might change.
And maybe what I would want to say to people is that this is not who you are.
Yeah.
This is what this problem does. It's like another part that gets awoken. And I think for as long as you feel like all these ways that you behave in secret, all these things that you don't like that you do and think, for as long as you keep identifying as this must be the real you, because I think it can feel like that, the stuff we do in secret, that must be the real us. Because what everyone else sees, that can't be real if all of this is going on in secret. And I think we are much more complicated than that. So what I would want to leave the listeners with is urging people to question that, to cast some doubt, that because this is what goes on behind closed doors, that this means that there's something fundamentally wrong, or that this is somehow the real you, because I think that's not true, and that will just keep you stuck here.
I think an important takeaway here is that you're not alone, that this is something that goes on, that this is something happening to more people than I'm sure we're aware of, and that it's not a sign of being broken or that you're weak or that it's hopeless, but that there's pain there, that there's layers of this that get played out, however, for whatever reasons they get played out, but that it's not something that you're alone in that struggle, and that can feel like that. I think that secret, that shame in eating in isolation has moments of feeling so alone and low, and that is something that, for whatever it's worth, that you're not alone in. Not that can pull you out of it in a moment, or not that it necessarily makes you feel like it's okay, but there is something to be said of it being a collective experience, and that kind of thing that does take away from that disconnection in a way.
Mm-hmm. If that's where you are, we get it. We've been there. That's why we do this, right? But I'm not quite sure how to.
Did you journal during your binge eating?
Is that how we're ending the episode?
No.
Okay, well, let's end it. Steph and I are going to go and talk about journaling. But thanks for listening, and catch you on the next episode.
It was relevant. Okay, bye.
I can't go back to it if you want.